Saint Peter Chrysologus was born in 300 AD in Imola, a town in the Roman province of Emilia, modern-day northern Italy. His family was believed to be of respectable status, though not noble. He was baptized and educated under the guidance of Cornelius, then the bishop of Imola. Cornelius also ordained him a deacon and later a priest, recognizing his talents in preaching and theological instruction. Peter received his early formation during a time when Western Roman Empire was weakening and the church faced challenges, both internal heresies and external political instability. Around 433 AD, following the death of Archbishop John of Ravenna, Peter was appointed the Archbishop of the city, a city that had become the imperial capital of the Western Roman Empire. His appointment was made not locally, but by Pope Sixtus III, the pontificate from 432 to 440, reportedly in response to a vision or divine inspiration. This unusual papal intervention was likely due to Peter's growing reputation for holiness and eloquence. Ravenna was an important religious and political center. As the archbishop, Peter served under the rule of Emperor Valentinian III and his mother Galla Placidia, who governed as regent. The court of Ravenna was closely linked to the church, and Peter enjoyed favor among imperial officials, which helped him secure orthodoxy and combat heresy in the region. Peter earned the epithet of Chrysologus, meaning golden worded, from the Greek chrysos, gold, and logos, word, in recognition of his exceptionally refined and compelling homilies. He was known for delivering short, succinct, and powerful sermons, often based on scripture and deeply theological themes. Many of his sermons addressed key doctrines, including the Incarnation, the Trinity, and the role of the Virgin Mary. His homilies were especially effective in combating the Arian and Monophysite heresies, which denied Christ's divinity or full humanity. He emphasized the mysteries of Christ's dual nature, helping to prepare the theological groundwork that later defined the Council of Chalcedon in 451 AD, though Peter passed away before the council took place. Approximately 176 sermons were attributed to him that have survived, thanks to collections assembled during his lifetime or shortly thereafter. These were often delivered during the liturgical year and have been preserved in various medieval manuscripts. Peter Chrysologus was a staunch advocate of orthodoxy and ecclesiastical unity. He firmly supported the authority of the Bishop of Rome, as seen in his correspondence with Eutychius, a presbyter in the Constantinople, who had appealed for support against accusations of heresy. Peter advised Eutychius to submit to Pope Leo I or Leo the Great, rather than act independently. This letter from 449 AD demonstrates Peter's recognition of the papal primacy in doctrinal matters, an important principle in the evolving structure of the church governance. He also guided his diocese through spiritual instructions, catechesis, and liturgical observances. His focus on Christological teaching moral reform and devotion to the Virgin Mary made his preaching especially impactful among both clergy and laity. St. Peter Chrysologus passed away in 450 AD, most likely in Imola, where he had been raised and ordained. His body was interred there in the Cathedral of San Cassiano, though some relics were later moved and venerated in various churches across Italy. His passing occurred just before the Council of Chalcedon, but his teachings influenced several key theological positions affirmed there. Peter's reputation for doctrinal clarity and eloquence endured throughout the Middle Ages. His sermons were cited by later fathers and theologians, and his liturgical commentaries contributed to the formation of the Western ecclesiastical traditions. In recognition of his contribution to the church doctrine and preaching, Pope Benedict XIII officially declared Peter Chrysologus as a doctor of the church in 1729. He remains one of the 37 doctors of the church, an honor reserved for saints who have made significant theological contributions. His feast day is celebrated on the 30th of July, though in some calendars it was formerly marked as December 2nd, the traditional date of his passing before being revised in the general Roman calendar. Peter Chrysologus' ministry took place during a turbulent time of the Western Roman Empire. Political fragmentation, barbarian invasions, and religious disputes placed enormous pressure on ecclesiastical leaders. The alliance between the Roman Church and the Western Imperial Court in Ravenna gave Peter the opportunity to influence both secular and religious affairs. His theological alignment with Rome during controversial like the Eutychian heresy helped bolster the position of the Roman papacy, especially under Pope Leo I. His insistence on doctrinal purity and pastoral clarity made him a key figure in shaping post-Nicene orthodoxy in Latin-speaking West. St. Peter Chrysologus is primarily represented in ecclesiastical art as a bishop and church doctor, reflecting his dual legacy both as a pastor and theological teacher. Although less frequently depicted than other prominent saints, he appears in select medieval and Baroque artworks, particularly in Italian contexts. His iconography emphasizes attributes tied to preaching, episcopal authority, and doctrinal eloquence, and often includes visual allusions to his title of Chrysologus, or golden worded. He is consistently portrayed wearing full regalia of a bishop, chasuble, pallium, and mitre, symbolizing his role as the Archbishop of Ravenna. St. Peter is often also holding a book or unrolled scroll, indicating his extensive homiletic corpus. This iconographic feature emphasizes his role as a preacher and doctor of the church. In rarer symbolic representation, Peter is depicted with a tongue of gold or a golden aura near his mouth, emanating rays of light while preaching. These elements visually reference his epithet of Chrysologus and underscore his famed eloquence. In some artworks, he is shown holding or standing beside a model of a church, possibly alluding to the churches of Ravenna or his ecclesiastical building efforts. As with all canonized saints, he is represented with a halo, often of gold, signifying his sanctity and eternal glory. There are, of course, many artistic works featuring Saint Peter Chrysologus, one of which is the mosaic in Saint Apollinaire Nuevo in Ravenna from the 6th century. This is one of the earliest and most significant visual depictions. This mosaic, part of a series of bishops in procession, likely includes Peter Chrysologus, though identification is debated due to lack of inscriptions. The series reflects the continuity of episcopal authority in Ravenna. There's also the fresco secco in the Cathedral of Imola from the 17th century. This is a Baroque fresco series commissioned for the Cathedral of San Cassiano. It includes a dramatic portrayal of Peter Chrysologus preaching. His upraised hand and dynamic posture symbolize spiritual authority. Golden scrolls in the background reference his sermons. There's also the altarpiece in the Church of Santa Maria in Porto, Ravenna from the 1600s. This is an altarpiece attributed to Cesare Ponti, which depicts Peter seated with a gold-lit scroll and the Holy Spirit above him. The dove represents divine inspiration, a motive that emphasizes his role as a spirit-guided preacher. There's also the engraving by Giovanni Battista de Cavaliere from the late 16th century. In this engraved series of church fathers, Peter is shown with a stylized mitre and richly detailed cope, seated while writing a sermon. The Latin inscription beneath identifies him with the title Doctor Ores, or Golden Doctor. A final example is the illuminated manuscript Codex in Biblioteca Marciana in Venice from the 13th century. This is a marginal illustration in a homilary manuscript which shows Peter instructing two clerics, scrolls in hand. The miniature reflects medieval veneration and of his doctrinal authority, as well as fidelity to papal orthodoxy. St. Peter's Chrysologus iconography has evolved over time, and there are many regional variations as well. The early medieval depictions from the 6th to 9th century in Ravenna focus on Peter among the succession of bishops, often anonymously. While as in Romanesque and Gothic art, he is rarely distinguished by individual attributes, reflected a period in which his specific cult was less widespread outside Emilia-Romagna. From the Renaissance onward, artistic interest in church doctors revived, and Peter was included among doctors in Italian churches' interiors, often in sets with Ambrose, Augustine, and Jerome. In Baroque iconography, he gains distinct traits like glowing manuscripts and more expressive gestures, influenced by the Counter-Reformation emphasis on preaching. In more modern depictions in devotional art, such as 20th century stained glass windows, several churches in Italy and the US depict him with modern adaptations of traditional symbols, bishop's crozier, gold-lettered scroll, and a backdrop of Ravenna's basilica. In icons written in the Eastern style, particularly the contemporary Catholic iconographers, he may be presented in frontal formal posture with his title inscribed in Greek or Latin, maintaining a theological tone. Although St. Peter Chrysologus is chiefly venerated for his preaching, doctrinal authority, and ecclesiastical leadership, a number of miracles have been attributed to him both during his lifetime and posthumously. These accounts originate primarily from local traditions in Ravenna and Imola. Later hagiographies and records from diocesan and monastic sources. His miracles reflect themes of healing, divine insight, protection, and intercession, consistent of his profile of a church father and bishop saint late in antiquity. One of the first miracle stories attributed to Peter occurred during his priesthood in Imola. A paralytic man whose name is lost to history but recorded as a known figure in the community had long been confined to a mat and was considered incurable. During a homily delivered at a local church, likely the original basilica near Imola's episcopal complex, Peter reportedly paused, descended from the ambo, and laid hands upon the man. The man immediately fully restored to strength, and to the astonishment of those present. This miracle bolstered Peter's local reputation as a man of sanctity and was one of the factors, that brought him to the attention of Pope Sixtus III. Shortly after Peter became Archbishop of Ravenna, the city experienced a famine in 435 AD due to the poor harvest and distributed supply routes following Gothic raids in northern Italy. The church annals describe increasing starvation with local granaries nearly empty. According to Vita Petri Chrysologi, an early 6th century biographical source, Peter prayed before the altar of San Giovanni Evangelista. After his prayers, stores of grains in several church granaries were found inexplicably replenished, allowing clergy and many townspeople to survive the winter. Clergy from the Ravenna diocese and the imperial household were reportedly present and attested to this event. A woman from Classe in 440 AD, the port town of Ravenna, was said to have been tormented by a violent spirit. This case reached Peter through reports by the local deacons. Brought to the Basilica Ursiana, she was said to have convulsed uncontrollably and screamed in unknown languages. After several prayers and laying on hands, Peter made the sign of the cross over her head and commanded the spirit to depart in the name of Christ. The woman collapsed, then awoke fully calm and coherent. Her healing was interpreted as divine confirmation of Peter's sanctity and episcopal authority. A final example was after his passing. Peter's tomb in Imola became a site of veneration, and reported healings were abound. Hagiographic records from the monastery San Cassiano detail pilgrims who experienced healing from fever, blindness, and injury after praying at his grave. One specific example is of a soldier who was injured in a skirmish with elite Lombards, reportedly regained full mobility in his leg after spending a night at prayer at Peter's tomb during the 8th century. These miracles contributed to strengthening the local cult of St. Peter and reinforced his reputation as a protector and intercessor. Though no formal canonization process existed at the time of St. Peter's passing, as it predates the structured process of later centuries, the multiplicity of these miracle accounts, especially those tied to healing and protection, supported his local veneration and eventual universal reputation as a saint. The miraculous elements of his life were compiled in various vitae and martyrologies, influencing how he has been perceived in liturgy and iconography. Saint Peter Chrysologus passed away around 450 AD, at a time when the formal process of canonization, as known today, did not exist. In the 5th century, saints were recognized through a combination of popular veneration, episcopal endorsement, and liturgical inclusion, particularly by local churches and communities. Shortly after his passing, Peter was locally venerated in Imola and Ravenna, where accounts of his holiness, preaching, and miracles circulated orally and in early hagiographies. His name appeared in several local calendars and martyrologies as early as the 6th century, such as in Hieronymian martyrology, which included his feast day and his noted episcopal role. By the 8th and 9th century, Peter's memory became embedded in the liturgical life of northern Italy, particularly within the Benedictine and Augustinian communities who preserved and copied his sermons. These texts were incorporated into homileries used throughout Latin Christendom. The Church of San Cassiano in Imola, which claimed possession of his relics, became a pilgrimage site. The local veneration of Peter Chrysologus was confirmed de facto by continued celebration of his feast day on December 2nd in several diocesan liturgical books. During the Middle Ages, the cult of St. Peter Chrysologus expanded beyond the Italian peninsula. His collected sermons, which focus on Christology, Marian devotion, and moral theology, gained renowned popularity due to the theological clarity and brevity. Monastic scriptoria at Monte Cassino, Cluny, and Corby were instrumental in transmitting his works across Europe. Theologians and preachers such as Peter Lombard and Bernard Clairvaux reference his sermons, further legitimizing his ecclesiastical stature. Although there was no papal canonization decree at this stage, Peter's universal recognition as a saint was solidified by the consistent liturgical commemoration in various regional calendars and the inclusion of his name in legendaries or collections of saints' lives. The formal ecclesiastical act that elevated Peter Chrysologus to full universal veneration and recognition as a canonized saint occurred with his proclamation as a doctor of the Church by Pope Benedict XIII on February 10, 1729. Pope Benedict XIII, the pontificate from 1724 to 1730, issued the declaration following a detailed examination of Peter's orthodox doctrine, moral integrity, and historical veneration. A review of his extant sermons by theologians of the Congregation of Rites, later known as the Congregation for Causes of Saints. There was also an evaluation of the antiquity and continuation of his cult, as well as the confirmation that his writings adhered to the Church's doctrine and contributed significantly to Chrysological and homiletic traditions. By naming him Dr. Ecclesia, the Church formally and permanently placed him in the canon of universal venerated church saints, given his feast day in the general Roman calendar. Initially commemorated on December 2nd, the Roman Martyrology recognized this date as his passing. However, following the liturgical reforms of the Second Vatican Council, his feast day was moved to the 30th of July, likely to avoid conflict with the season of Advent, during which December 2nd often falls. This change was incorporated into the 1970 Roman Missal, reflecting the modernization of the liturgical calendar while preserving Peter's place among the saints. Although not canonized through a post-Tridentine judicial process, St. Peter Chrysologus is considered canonized by equivalent canonization, a form in which the Pope confirms long-standing and universal veneration, including the presence of relics, celebrated on a feast day, and doctrinal orthodoxy. The Congregation for Causes of Saint recognizes this as a valid path to sainthood pre-congregation figures. For pre-congregation figures. His doctrine of the Church also carries doctrinal endorsement reserved only for those teachings have universal and enduring significance for the Church. In conclusion, St. Peter Chrysologus' canonization was a gradual process rooted in early and sustained veneration, formalized by his proclamation as a doctor of the Church in 1729. His elevation was based on the sanctity of his life, consistency of local and universal devotion, and the enduring theological value of his writings. Though not subject to the modern canonical procedure, his sainthood holds full legitimacy within the Church's magisterium.